Muscle and nervous tissue. To begin, we're going to look at muscle tissue. There are three major types of muscle tissue that are found throughout the body. The first is skeletal muscle tissue. As the name implies, this is the type of muscle that you'll find attached to the skeleton. So if you look at your arm, the major muscles in your arm, or skeletal muscles in your arm, would be like your biceps brachii, your triceps brachii. If we want to categorize the skeletal muscle, we would look for a couple characteristics. One is that the cells are multinucleate. What that means is that there is more than one nucleus per cell. They are also striated. So if you were to look at skeletal muscle tissue underneath the microscope, you would see that there were a pattern of lines running up and down inside of the cells. Those are striations. Skeletal muscle tissue is also voluntary. That means that you can decide when you want to contract a skeletal muscle. For example, your biceps brachii. You can decide you want to contract it and pull it up and flex your forearm. Cardiac muscle tissue is another type of muscle tissue, and as this name implies, you can probably guess that you would find cardiac muscle tissue in the heart. It is also striated, so when looking at this type of muscle tissue underneath the microscope, you'll be able to see lots of lines running back and forth across the tissue. The cells for cardiac muscle tissue are branched, so one cell communicates with multiple other cells. This is important for the purpose of contracting the heart in rhythm. The cells really need to be able to communicate with one another. Another structure that you're going to see with cardiac muscle tissue are intercalated discs. What intercalated discs are is gap junctions. Again, since it's so important for cardiac muscle tissue to communicate with one another, it's best if the cytoplasm of adjacent cells is actually shared through those gap junctions. Cardiac muscle tissue, unlike skeletal muscle tissue, is involuntary. You do not get to decide consciously when to make your heart beat, but overall, that's a good thing anyhow. Taking a look at the two pictures here, the one on the left is your skeletal muscle. You can see the lines, the banding patterns running up and down through the tissue. Those are striations. Additionally, you can see the nuclei pushed to the side of the cells. Those would be more than one per cell. On the right-hand side, you can see the cardiac muscle tissue. It also has a banding pattern running up and down inside of it, but there are some really dark lines that you can see in this tissue. Those are those gap junctions or the intercalated discs. The last type of muscle that you'll find in the body is smooth muscle. Smooth muscle because it lacks striations. If you wanted to look at the structure of smooth muscle, you'd note that it was fusiform in shape. That means that it is fatter in the center, but it tapers off at each end. Smooth muscle is involuntary. Again, you don't have the ability to control when this type of muscle contracts. You would find smooth muscle in places like your internal organs, maybe the stomach and the intestines, to move your food along. You'll also find it in your skin. It gives you the goosebumps when you're cold. This is a picture of smooth muscle. You can see in the center of each of these cells there's a nucleus where the majority of the cytoplasm and such is, and then at each end it kind of tapers off to a point. The next type of tissue is nervous tissue. Nervous tissue is made up of cells called neurons. They have a characteristic appearance. Each neuron is going to have an axon. The axon is usually a singular, long process. It's used to send information. A dendrite is going to be more numerous. So usually each neuron will have multiple dendrites. So these are many short processes that come off of the cell body of a neuron. These are going to receive information. They're sensory. The cell body then is the majority of that cell, and it's the place that houses the nucleus. You'll also find some glial cells surrounding neurons. Glial cells are supportive cells. And they can do a variety of different functions, such as maintaining ion balances. They can provide the blood-brain barrier, which we'll talk about a little bit later when we get into the nervous system. This is a schematic drawing of a neuron. It does take on a relatively star-shaped pattern. At the top, there's one process leaving that cell. That would be your axon. The other processes around the cell body, which contains the nucleus, would be the dendrites. And then in the area surrounding the neuron, you can see a bunch of little black dots. Those are going to be your glial cells.